So it's not for kids.
How's your knee doing?
It's fine. I feel like banging my knee is like the easiest way to identify how old I am getting. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Like, you think, oh, I'm not old, I'm only 30 something, and then you like hit your knee on something and you're like, and you understand like why they made that joke in Family Guy where he's just on the street for like 40 minutes like
Jokes that don't make sense as a teen.
Yeah.
I know I'm old because I had black licorice recently and I was like, this is actually pretty good. And
so
that was kind of an unreal moment.
I've had the same thing happen recently with just like beer in general. Something about like, I don't know, like fermented flavors, and yeah, like black licorice fits into this as well, where you're just kind of like, you know what? I get it. Like I see the appeal now. Wow, I'm enlightened. I'm sounding more and more like Keanu Reeves in my head. I don't think it's actually coming out in the mic that way.
Keanu Reeves is the metric by which you get older.
The more Keanu Reeves like you become, the older you are, I guess.
The more you sound like teen Keanu Reeves, the more old you are. The more you sound like current Keanu Reeves, the younger you are.
Interesting.
It's like Benjianu Reeves. Benjianu Butt Reeves. Benjianu Butt Reeves. Is this new character that I'm developing.
Reeves. Okay.
Ages normally, played by Keanu Reeves. Voice goes backwards in time.
Okay. I now understand what you... I was really struggling with that one.
The portmanteau was a challenging concept. I will admit.
Challenging concept, like I don't even know if it's even materialized into something like it's still conceptual.
I just imagine like Nicolas Cage, and he's like down in that dungeon, you know, and they're like giving the there's so many pop culture references right now, but
that's what we're known for. Okay, it's the bread and butter of our podcast, unlike the meat and potatoes.
Nicolas Cage is giving Boromir, you know, like the red herring directions to find the final treasure. And he's just like, it's Benjianu Butt Reeves. That's what the light means. It's a portmanteau of Benjamin Button and Keanu Reeves. And then Boromir is like, oh shit, you're totally right. And like goes back up the elevator. And then they just turn around and they're like, what an idiot. And just like walk into the...
Okay, like which movie is this a reference to? It's like Lord of the Rings and National Treasure. Like at the same time.
Which is also a portmanteau, right?
Bro, no one...
Nord of the Trings.
This... Referencing National Treasure, I feel like, is another sign of being old, because it's like no one's watching that movie. It's probably like overdue for an unasked for sequel. Did they do that? Was there like a...
I don't think so.
National Treasure could fix our country if they come up with a third one right now.
Well, okay, sure.
You know what I mean?
All right, we're gonna write it. Let's do it, Tom. Nord of the Trings featuring Benjianu Butt Reeves.
Nord of the
Welcome
Trings.
to Shelf Stable.
Yeah.
Podcast celebrating board games that have stood the test of time. I'm your host, Kenny Katayama.
And I guess I'm your other host, Tom Bowers. Today, our feature topic is ethical consumption of board games. But before we get into that, let's just talk about some of the stuff we've been playing recently.
Tom, I don't want to scare you too much, but there's a yokai behind you.
Oh my god. Yokai aren't like inherently mean. They're just like beyond comprehension, right?
They're kind of the Cthulhu of Japan.
Yeah, a little bit. That's not reductive at all.
Let me try that again. I think they're just the folklore monsters of Japan.
To be clear, I don't think there's anything problematic with calling yokai the Cthulhu of Japan, other than how like almost like conceited and derivative it sounds.
I got to play Yokai Septet from 2018. Designer Muneyuki Yokouchi and published by Ninja Star Games. Yokai Septet is a trick taker, and it's an actual trick taker. We have to clarify that on this show. It is in the traditional format of euchre, in the sense that you play in teams of two, and you are trying to communicate to your teammate certain things about your hands by trading 3 cards at the start of the round. Where it deviates is in the objectives. So in Yokai Septet, you're not making a bid as far as how many hands you're going to win, and you're not trying to hit somebody with a certain thing or take as many tricks as possible. Your one and only goal in Yokai Septet is to get the 7s. So there's a 7 in each suit, and there's 7 suits. But here's the catch. The suits are staircased. And what I mean by that is the first suit has the numbers 1 through 7. The second suit has the numbers 2 through 8, and so on and so forth until you get to 7 through 13. So you got to play each hand differently. The 7 is located in a different spot in terms of rank for each of the 7 suits. You win a round if you take 4 out of the 7 sevens, and you score depending on how difficult those 7s were to take. So the 7s that are, weaker in their particular suit score for 2 or 3 points. Whereas the 7 in the lowest suit, it scores for 0. It just helps you meet that condition of taking 4 of the 7 yokai bosses. There's a lot going on here. The way I would describe the flow of the game is that a lot of it is determined by the trade and getting a good read on your teammate. And then the actual trick-taking part of it kind of plays out on rails. And it's really just sussing out what your opponents have and making the right calls. If you're doing well in this game, you kind of maintain control. You don't allow your opponent team to come in and swoop it from you. It doesn't really matter who takes the trick between you and your teammate, but you're kind of ping-ponging back and forth. And again, that's in my experience of playing the game. Maybe I'm playing on like a lower level, and then other people have other thoughts about how you pass the lead and stuff like that. I think this game's really cool. I think it has amazing artwork too. And I love that the 7s in the game have like a foil treatment to them to really kind of oomph them up and emphasize like, oh, these are the important cards in the deck. I'm curious how you will feel about this one, Tom. But I have a sneaking suspicion that you might enjoy it because it's very concise in its objective and it executes it really well.
Well, I've still never played euchre, but as we all know, I'm probably trick-taking's biggest fan. In fact, I love trick-taking so much that I call non-taking games trick-takers.
Yeah, I prefer this game to euchre. I'll just go out and say it. But also, I didn't grow up playing euchre, so it doesn't have like a nostalgic feel for me. I feel like euchre suffers from a lot of it's an old game, so it has a lot of these fiddly rules.
Doesn't it fascinate you thinking about, when we actually become like really old, where we're going to be like, oh, let's play the old classic Yokai Septet,
Yeah, and things were simpler back then.
Yeah. Or will we be stuck in like some kind of like metaverse, like VR headset?
I think probably, yeah.
The interesting thing about this one to me is that you're describing the art, highlighting the art on the cards and such. I feel like that's impressive for not being of this, what feels like a much more recent era of trick-taking.
Like it was definitely part of that that boom that happened with the crew, but it wasn't part of this like second wave that we're experiencing now. Oh, wow. So the crew came out in 2019, so it actually predates.
It was way ahead of the curve.
And really, it's a re-implementation of another game from the same designer that came out in 2015. So if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty. That was Yokai Septet from 2018.
So what have I been playing recently? Honestly, Kenny, I haven't actually been playing that many games in general, but there is a game that I've been thinking about a lot. No thanks to Reiner Knizia, of all people. And that's Craps, the classic betting dice game that you've probably heard of and have seen in movies.
I know we got a lot of potty humor on this show, but can you keep it a little PG? Why are you talking about Craps like it's a game?
Yeah, don't worry. There's more coming if you catch my drift. I don't know why they call it craps specifically. I think half of the fun of craps is the fact that like the names that they came up with for these things have aged very bizarrely. The thing that fascinates me about it is that you see it in movies. It's always like depicted in advertisements as like a part of like casino lifestyle, like being retired and gambling. You're going to go play craps. What turned me onto it in particular is that Reiner Knizia wrote a book about dice games, like all the dice games. And of course, craps is in there. I was curious to know, like, what the fuck even is this game? Because I've always seen it in my periphery of knowledge, but still had no idea even where to begin playing it. You know, what are you betting on even? What's the point? I'll try not to explain all the rules of craps, but the gist of it is that you need to roll a 7 or an 11. If you don't roll either of those, then there are 3 numbers that you can't roll, 2, 3, and 11. And if you rolled anything else, that becomes the number you have to roll again before you roll a 7, but not 11. Yeah. So if you were following that at all, congratulations, you now know how to play craps. Where the betting comes in is what's mildly interesting, perhaps. In home games, or I guess street craps as you might call it, or private interpersonal games, the player who is rolling the dice, the shooter, they place a center bet kind of on themselves. Like they're saying, okay, I'm going to pass or fail this test of rolling the dice, this arbitrary, like weird numbers test, right? I'm going to pass. I'm betting on myself. And then everyone else basically has to cover how much I bet on myself. Either I pass or I fail. And then in the middle of rolling the dice to determine whether or not I've passed, because a lot of the time what you're going to do is like you'll roll a 6. And okay, now you have to roll a 6 again before you roll a 7. So you roll again, it's a 2. You roll again, it's a 4. You roll again, it's an 11. None of that matters anymore. But you're rolling and rolling and rolling, and then finally something happens. You either you roll a 6 or you roll a 7. If you roll a 6 again, you collect everyone's money. If you roll a 7, then everyone gets paid out equal to the amount that they covered on you. What gets crazy, especially in like private interpersonal games, is that you can basically start a sub game of craps during any given dice roll. You know, I roll the 6. And then before I roll again, someone's like, okay, I'm betting on the next game. That's called a cum bet. And I'm not making that up, obviously. Why would I?
I love that you'll say like a bunch of true ones and you'll just add like a fake one in there or something.
That'd be really good. I should have thought about that ahead of time. But yeah, so if you cum bet, then of course someone has to sort of take you up on that. And that's called the don't cum bet. Right? So it's like, I know, it's crazy. I mean, like, and you can see why, right? I was like very fascinated by this game pretty much from that point forward. So I'll be going to Vegas in a couple of months. I do plan on trying my hand at craps. I understand it's, you know, just like anything at the casino, it is in fact a losing game, but I suppose it's mildly interesting that there's a betting strategy where your expected value is like a negative 4 cents to the dollar. I think out of pure curiosity, I've got to try this out because, you know I'm shouldn't expect to make money, but it sounds like it can be kind of a good time. And that's something I think that I found interesting about Knizia's book is that at the end, he details the odds about what it means to bet on the pass or don't pass against the shooter, and the odds work out to be like slightly below favorable, I think, for the shooter. Like I think the shooter is slightly worse odds if you're passing the roll of the shooter around. Knizia is just like, what's a little bit of like bad odds for a good time with your friends, you know? And I just think that's so great. I suppose we should say something like we don't sponsor or want to promote gambling. Obviously, we're talking about games and like, what is there like really much of a game? We're looking at gambling games.
Yeah, we're looking at the game as an artifact as opposed to whether or not it's fun to gamble.
Yeah, exactly. So, obviously disclaimer or whatever is like gamble responsibly, perhaps, or just probably don't do it at all.
I did Google the origin of the name. It sounds like it comes from crabs.
Kenny Googling craps cum, C-U-M. Like,
You got a lot of interesting things. The history of craps, it started as a simplification of a European game called Hazard. And in that game, I guess there was crabs, which was like a variation of Hazard. And crabs is, I guess it's a term used for when you get a low roll. Somewhere along the way, they flipped the B into a P.
kind of like IHOP did, but in reverse.
Yeah. International House of Balls. So that's craps from 1125.
From the 12th century, allegedly.
Tom, I played a more recent game.
That really narrows it down.
I played a Scapegoat from 2020. This is designed by John Perry, published by Indie Boards and Cards. Scapegoat is a social deduction game, but you don't have to be like, it wasn't me, what are you talking about? Because a lot of the lying or the sussing plays through the cards and the actions themselves. And so if you're somebody that is a little bit hesitant about playing social deduction games because you are either not comfortable lying or you feel like you're bad at it, you might want to check out Scapegoat because it gets around a lot of those common problems. What happens in Scapegoat is if you've ever played like the Chameleon, you have like this grid that shows you who your quote unquote target is. And you roll dice and it'll tell you which of the other players is your target. Now, what's clever about this is that kind of like Spyfall, everyone at the table is going to get a target except one other player is going to get a different target. In Spyfall, you just get a message that says you are the spy. And then you're like, oh no. In Scapegoat, you think that you're in the know and everybody else has the same target as you. So you're playing the game and not only are you trying to figure out whether or not you are the scapegoat, you're also trying to figure out how you can frame the person that is your target by coordinating with the other players, assuming you aren't the scapegoat, without them figuring out that they're the scapegoat. And there's a lot of funny, interesting things that happen with that because you're telegraphing a lot of information, but that information can be interpreted in a number of ways. You know, it's like, did they take this card out of their hand to show that they don't need it? Or do they take it out of their hand because they have two copies of it and they're trying to hand it to someone else? There's always that like sneaking suspicion, that paranoia that you might be the scapegoat. And we played 2 games of this. One of them, I was the scapegoat and I figured it out too late. And then everybody hit me with the idiot. Clearly we were misdirecting you. Taylor was working the strings there. She was acting like people were crazy and doing really bad moves. Mm-hmm. To deflect from the fact that they were all coordinating against me. And it worked. Good job. And then in the second game, Taylor was the scapegoat, but she figured it out. And so she not only was able to like figure out that she was the scapegoat, but she also had a backup plan of making me paranoid about being the scapegoat again. And she didn't even need to like turn in the like I figured it out action, because when it came to my turn, I was like, I think I'm the scapegoat. And I tanked the game for us anyway. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things going on in this one. I think it's distinctively different from other social deduction games. And for that alone, I think people should explore it, because I feel like the cultural vibe around social deduction right now is like, ugh, played that, done with it. I was delightfully like surprised at how different and interesting this one was.
It kind of sounds like this is a game that rewards expert gaslighting.
Oh, yeah. It's like gaslighting the game for sure. Because things can be interpreted in different ways and you don't even necessarily need to speak to it sometimes. It's just taking an action can create paranoia. And so taking the right action will offload suspicion from yourself and also make somebody make a bad call. I had a good time with this. Scapegoat from 2020.
Yeah, that's another one that sounds fascinating. You know, I really ought to play some games this weekend. Is all I think I learning this week.
I'm starting to get this feeling that like board games are pretty fun, so we should play more of them.
All right, well, I'm taking us back a couple of years again. 2017. I'm talking about Fugitive, designed by Tim Fowers and published by Fowers Games. What I've played is the second edition, which admittedly is from 2022.
I don't know. We've done this a lot where we do like a reprint. I'm totally cool with this.
Fugitive is an exclusively 2-player game that is basically all about deducing what is in the other player's hand, but it's asymmetrical in the sense that one person is the fugitive and one player is the cop or whatever who's chasing the fugitive down. And it's done very much in the style of like Hitchcockian noir thriller. And when I say that, what I mean is that the art, which is done by Ryan Goldsberry, features these characters across the gamut of cards. If I remember correctly, they're like numbered 1 through 60. And if you laid all of them out next to each other, it would straight up look like the storyboard for a movie. It's cool how it like tells this visual story. The fugitive is trying to play the cards sort of in order, and there's like restrictions on sort of how far ahead they can sort of run based on what limited knowledge that they're forced to turn face up. The cop is basically trying to suss out just how far away they are on a given turn. The asymmetric gameplay of this is interesting. We love Netrunner here. It has a similar vibe in a lot of ways. Obviously, it's not as technical or thematic per se, but the theme that it does have, this theme of basically recreating Harrison Ford's The Fugitive, is fun. It's cool. And it plays very well, plays very smoothly. Like, this is like a great game to take camping with your significant other type beat, I would say. I'd like to try this one again or even more. I haven't even had Helena play it with me, and I do think she'd actually enjoy it quite a bit. Your thoughts?
I thought it was okay. I was sold on the premise, and then when we actually played it, I was kind of underwhelmed by it. It felt like The Fugitive had very little agency, and then the most interesting part of the game was the deduction part for the detective. And even that was like, it just felt like a little bit one note. Like there's only so many variations that you can make of that scenario. It kind of feels like it might play out the same every time. I like the components in the second edition. I thought they were really nice.
For sure. I can see what you're saying right there, right? That it would play out very samey if you were to do it a lot over and over again. Well, that's where I kind of wonder what sort of meta context could develop between two people who maybe did play this a lot.
Right, yeah. I feel like it's a bit premature to make the statements I'm making, so I don't know.
Yeah, but I hear what you're saying. I think even if you were to create almost like this meta where, you're trying to think about what they think that you'll think that they'll think that you'll think, type stuff. Eventually you'll reach some sort of maximum of that, and then you'll just be doing it almost the same way every time. I mean, ultimately you still have to go through the cards in order, right? So
right.
We'll have to see. Maybe I'll report back in a year or two if I've played this a few more times.
Well, that was Fugitive from 2017.
100 games to play before you die.
Damn it. His birthday has not yet arrived. December 13th, 1925. An actor who once provided us with an incredibly embarrassing Cockney accent, as I understand it, whose name I will not mention because of the alleged curse.
Keep that one in your holster.
He's got 4 months to get his act together and play through this list of the 100 games that you have to play before you turn 100. You're legally required, according to this podcast, to do that. This is a list created by Kenny with a lot of input from board gamers around the world.
Oh
Game
my
number
God,
48
Tom, go!
on this list is The Search for Planet X from 2020, designed by
You're really
Matthew
juicing
O'Malley
it tonight.
and Ben Rosset, published by Renegade Games. Kenny, why is this on the list?
Search for Planet X is here for deduction. I was going to say it's here for the app-based, but I think this got added after Chronicles of Crime, so there's a bit of overlap there. It is another game that is assisted by an app.
Boo. I'm kidding.
In the Search for Planet X, you're racing to try and figure out where Planet X is. And you're going to get a bunch of hints like Planet X is not wearing a red t-shirt. Planet X is next to the planet that's wearing the blue t-shirt. And so you're using that information to ultimately come to the single solution for that particular game. If you do it first and you do it correctly, as well as answer all these other questions along the way, then you are the winner. There's a number of games like this. I mean, the most well-known one is Mastermind. We call these kind of like abstract deduction games. A little bit different from like the whodunit mysteries, but in the same ballpark, I would say, as like Clue and things like that. More recently, Turing Machine.
Oh, yeah.
I think Turing Machine is a really good example of this, but it's not shelf stable. So
New game alert.
So I think these kind of games have gotten a resurgence recently, probably because Wordle was so big too. I think that influenced a lot of the production of these kinds of games as well. If you like this idea of like figuring it out and there's only one solution, and if you fit all the pieces together, you can find it. But if you're like really clever about it, you can skip a few steps and make some assumptions here and there, or maybe you take a risk because you're fairly certain that the likelihood of this not being the case is low. That whole thing, like this is totally the kind of game for you. If you are looking for a little bit more interaction between players, this is not a game where you really do anything, because any sort of conversation that you would have would be just giving away information to others. Deduction, Search for Planet X. I want to kind of highlight Zendo. We've talked about Zendo on this podcast before. The reason I want to highlight Zendo is that it didn't make it on the list. I think it's on the honorable mentions for the Search for Planet X. But it isn't the same kind of figuring out. It is what folks call induction, in the sense that you're trying to find a pattern and the highest likelihood of what the thing that you are trying to figure out is, versus a deduction game, which is much more common, like Search for Planet X, where there is a singular solution. And if you had all the information, you'd be able to put the pieces together to figure it out. Still kind of different, but the vibe is similar. And that's why we ended up not putting Zendo on here. But I still wanted to just give it a shout out because it's a very good game, and I feel like it's worthy of a mention too.
Yeah, fair enough. I've played Search for Planet X. I have what I will say is a love-hate relationship with this type of game. And really this type of puzzle in game form, I almost never actually feel like I want to commit to playing it. I can see through the matrix and like discover this. I mean, it'll sound like I'm glazing myself, but it's kind of true. It's just like I've managed to play these where I can, part the matrix, see the light, figure out some sort of assumption that will like lead to a derivation that, reveals the answer. I
think you're being fair, and I feel very similarly. I actually almost enjoy these games more solo, and they're very soloable.
Yes, that's part of it, and then the other part of it is like it's so much brain burn, and it's it's put in a competitive environment like it is in Planet X or even Mystery of the Abbey, which is a lot lighter fare, relatively speaking. That pressure just makes kind of like the stress of having it figured out, taking those risks like worse. And then at the same time, like sometimes it feels like you can just like really get lucky, which sort of frustrates almost all the effort that I'm putting into it anyway. So
yeah,
basically
it's kind of
I try too hard.
No, but like even I'm not super competitive, but I feel that same kind of stress. Like usually in a competitive game, the competition enhances the game. But in this, I almost feel like it just creates stress, because there's something very therapeutic or kind of enjoyable about figuring out a problem where you almost kind of want unlimited time. Like when you do a crossword, the idea of like competitive crosswording is not on your mind. I'm sure that's a thing, but I'm saying like the typical person that does a Sudoku puzzle or does like a crossword, they have a specific idea of like how they want to interface or interact or enjoy this experience. And I feel like these games are more akin to that experience than your traditional board game, and trying to force feed that model actually creates more stress than enjoyment personally. But
no, totally.
I think the puzzle itself is super interesting. I don't want to make it sound like I don't like this game. It's just I like it as a solo game.
Yeah, absolutely. Which actually gives me a really hilarious mental image, because I think the place I see people doing Sudoku the most is on an airplane, right, to pass the time. Imagine the flex of like pulling out this or Turing machine like on the airplane.
Trying to fit it on your like folding tray, your tray table.
You like
love
hit
that.
the turbulence, like you like all the pieces.
Oh, I'm
are
so sorry. Can you
rattling.
give me that piece? It fell on the ground. Yeah. Search for Planet X, a great game to play on the airplane from
There you
2020.
All right, Kenny, enough of that bullshit. It's time for the real part of the episode. The part of the episode where we get real, where we talk about real shit, the true, absolute meat and potatoes of this week's
bread and
episode.
butter.
No, the bread and butter was the earlier part. Now we're in the meat and potatoes. See, first you eat bread with butter, like at fucking Olive Garden or Cheesecake Factory, okay? That's what they bring you first. Then they bring you the meat and the potatoes. And that's the part of the episode that we're on now, which is the main topic of this week, ethical consumption of board games. This is brought to us by our patron, Tim.
Yeah, so I wrote down it was Tim, but that's fake news. It was actually Rich. So sorry, Rich.
Okay, so
Giving
let me
you credit
do
now.
it again. Main topic of this week, which is ethical consumption of board games, and I guess maybe ethical consumption in general, brought to you by our patron, Rich. If you want to get into the Discord where you can potentially decide the topic of this week's episode, hit us up on patreon.com/shelfstablecast. Thank you, Rich, for this one. Ethical consumption. I think it's really funny that I gave like a little sponsor shout out to our Patreon.
That's a nice touch. I like that.
Yeah. What does that mean to you, Kenny? Actually, I'd love to know.
I was really racking my brain around this one. It's like so tricky, but then I feel like we have a lot of experience with it recently. To me, it's like what you choose to put your money toward. Whether or not there are lines you draw because of your morals or beliefs or how it affects people, as well as like whether or not you believe something should be consumed as a whole by folks, not just specifically your buyer dollars. It's just this overall concept of like, is it okay to buy this?
Yeah.
It's less about the money transferring. It's more about showing support of something. And so this has been a hot topic recently in board gaming, at least. If you are a loyal listener, you've listened back and you've heard like we talked about CGE and the Harry Potter situation. We also talked about the Ace of Spades and its representation of people.
Yes, that was wild.
I think that's where this topic idea came from.
I think that is where this was born out.
The question becomes, Tom, where do you draw your lines and why do we draw some lines and not others? Because it's like in a perfect world, we would have a very clear-cut definition of what we should be giving money to and what we shouldn't. Even if it is possible to do that, I don't think it's easy to find that definition. And I would argue that there probably isn't a clear-cut definition. It's more of a gray area. Each person is going to kind of create their own view of what lines they draw. And on top of that, they might even change those goalposts depending on what the topic is.
Wait a second, Kenny.
Things like
Are
that.
you telling me that context and nuance matter? Because I don't think so. I think it's a pretty clear-cut case. Because I heard someone on Tumblr say once that there is no ethical consumption under capitalism. Therefore, ergo, there is no ethical consumption anywhere in the world except maybe Vietnam. No, so like serious talk though, that is a slogan that you hear. If you follow Hassan Piker on Twitch, probably you've heard that, right? It's not mainstream by any stretch, but it is an idea that gets out there. Someone explained it really well once, and I forgot exactly what they said, but the gist of it was that like you'll never escape the current status quo in a sense whenever you make a purchase. If you consume anything in modern society, it's part of a global network that is currently hurtling all of us toward fucking like global warming, ecological collapse, nuclear war, genocide, colonialism.
Right.
Pick your poison. You're screwed.
I think that's a really good place to start. Like we should establish that. Like when we're talking about these other things, we're not saying that like some things are okay and other things aren't. And to your point, Tom, I think I agree with that sentiment that there is no ethical consumption. under capitalism. Like,
Yeah.
But then it becomes like, what are those things that actually motivate us as individuals?
That's what I was going to get at, which is that, like, just because, like, you know, the world is a shit does not mean that you should throw up your hands and be like, I give up. Like, what's the point, right?
Right.
It's more to say, like, the concern you have, perhaps, when you go out and you buy, like, the example that popped in my mind is so bad as a serious note, but it's maybe the perfect thing we need. If you go out and you buy a silicone dildo and you think to yourself, like, silicone though is like bad, it's plastic, it's forever chemicals or whatever. It's just like, it's already been manufactured, it's already been produced. Why not derive the pleasure from it that you sort of deserve, right? Don't let the guilt of consumption weigh you down forever. And at the same time, we can hold both things to be true, that not only...
Well, that's a take, though.
Not only should you not be guilty, though, but you should at least, I think, do your part. Do some of the legwork. You can walk a few extra feet to the next store to avoid supporting some kind of bigotry or some kind of colonial act, right?
Yeah, if you're worried about the forever plastics, for example, with the dildo, like...
Get a wooden one. Get a glass one. Glass is recyclable.
Well, that's one topic, right? That there are already things bad in the world, so or there are already things that are made. So me going and consuming it is not going to change that. I disagree. I think that first of all, and maybe this is me being a deontologist again, but like I think that just the principle of consuming the thing, regardless of whether or not it has an effect on things, is something to consider. But on top of that, I do believe that there is a cultural shift that can arise from enough people not consuming something. I mean, we saw this with Target recently. We saw it with the CGE.
Yeah.
These things do have an effect. And so to just say, well, it's already made, we're not necessarily endorsing it, but it doesn't hurt for us to consume it. I think that's wrong. I want
to clarify real quick.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying like just because it exists, therefore it's okay to buy it. That's
no,
not
you
what
were
I'm meaning to
you
say.
were giving an example of something someone might think when they go and buy it. No, I understood that part.
It's more just like just because you had to exchange, currency for goods and services doesn't mean that like you're a bad person, I guess, right? Like the ethics of it were sort of decided before you came to be there at that moment making that purchase for the most part, right? But what you're saying, I also very much agree with, which is that like we've seen the power of collective action, people canceling their subscriptions, people, coming out publicly saying that they will not financially or even just materially support a publisher who's made a bad decision. Stuff like this does work very much. I agree. The boycotts have to be like, they have to be widespread. They have to be like vocal, and it has to kind of come from thought leaders to some extent in order to, I think, really hit that stride.
I totally agree.
I just realized I sound like a Leninist right now, but nonetheless.
I swear we'll talk about board games in a second, but let me take us in another route. While we're still talking about like usage, I am I'm a flexitarian, right? Because I don't think it's fair to say I'm a full-on vegetarian, because I'm doing vegetarians a disservice. But generally, like 90% of the time, I will not consume meat. That's not even true, right? Because I eat fish. I'm a flexipescatarian. Holy moly. Anyway.
You won't eat land animals, I guess.
I won't eat land animals.
If you can help it.
95% of the time. However, I will make exceptions. One of those exceptions is if somebody messes up my order and brings me a plate at a restaurant, and then I was like, I can't eat this. And they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. Let me take it back and I will bring you what you ordered. If they're going to throw it in the trash, and in those instances, and this has happened, I'm like, oh no, it's cool. I can eat this. Like I'll eat this. I'd rather you not make another dish and just throw this out.
I literally saw you do this in Vegas. We somehow got served beef tartare.
Yeah.
When like, I don't think anyone even came close to asking for that, but yeah.
It's not ideal for me, but it's worse if they threw it out at that point. I guess, how do I reconcile that, right? Because if you go back to the dildo example, like in that case, you have an active decision not to consume the dildo because either it'll drive them to consider how much inventory of dildo they have, or somebody else will come and take it. But there's not going to be another person that eats my food, likely. It's just going to get thrown out.
Right.
And so in declining to consume it, I am not reducing the harm that has been caused in my mind. You know, again, I'm not saying everybody should have this stance about meat. This is a very personal thing, but I'm trying to explain my rationale about it.
Yeah. This is like a good example of generally carrying like nuance in your pocket, in a sense where it's just like you understand that, you know, eating animals is not something that you're comfortable with, or maybe you think, I don't know if you think it's just morally wrong per se, or if you just decided that for yourself, right?
Yeah,
we're pretty
for me, it's
postmodernist around here, I would say.
Do we want to pivot to board games?
Yeah. So how do we bring this back, right?
So my thinking was we can talk about what lines we draw.
In our Discord, I think it was like Rich who was saying this kind of, which is like, are we going to talk about Jimmy Kimmel on this show?
Oh, yeah. And like whether or not we're not going to talk about Disney games. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a legitimate concern because it was a very worrying moment in the political climate that we find ourselves in right now, right? The gist of it is that if you're worried about free speech in this country, or worried about totalitarian takeovers, authoritarianism, etc., Jimmy Kimmel getting canceled, whether you think he's a funny guy or not, is a worrying sign. And the way in which he was canceled, I'm not going to go over the whole news segment, right? But the gist of it is like, you know, should we boycott all games with Disney IP? Should we cancel our Disney Plus subscriptions, et cetera, et cetera? Mm-hmm. I think those of you out there that did cancel Disney Plus, power to you. I'm working on that for myself. I think just generally, because they're always just embroiled in some shit. That's where I was kind of going to get at this, which is like, to boycott all of Disney at this moment in time is almost to boycott all of nerd culture, because they've just sort of bought a lot of it out, you know?
Yeah, I struggle with this one because there's like two entities raging inside of me. On one hand, I'm like, it's the principle, right? We should just not, because we should be in solidarity, not supporting something that's wrong. Mm-hmm. But then on the other end, I'm like, this is an example. If we go back to, you know, what effect do we have with CGE? It's like we do have an influence. I don't know that it really does anything in this particular scenario to not talk about Imperial Assault, for example. It's so far removed from Disney as an entity. And on top of that, that's not going to be the grain of sand that affects things. But I'm being hypocritical in saying that, because earlier it's like, that's not the thing that matters with the dildo. You know, keep coming back to the dildo. I just got dildos on the brain, just like you know?
Yeah.
It's tough.
What we can say is don't buy Disney themed dildos right now. Okay. That's the least
for
you can
sure.
do. There's
the microplastics and Jimmy Kimmel.
There's gotta be a glass dildo you can get that doesn't have anything related to Disney on it. Okay.
It's so hard, because no matter what, we are going to draw a line that folks are not on board with. And I recognize that. And I don't think it's ideal, but like at the same time, I think if we exclude every Star Wars, every Marvel, every Disney based board game from our repertoire moving forward, in my mind, that would be a line too far, to a point where it's like, I don't think personally that is something that I want to consider doing.
Yeah.
I'm not being a good person saying that, but like, CGE I had no problem with, because it's a topic that is so close to home in terms of it being like a publisher that I care about a lot. But on top of that, I felt like we had a voice, and it directly affected the publisher. It's the publisher that's in question. It's not like an IP based thing. I feel like these distinctions are arbitrary to a certain extent, but they are distinctions nonetheless that I'm making in my mind, and that are explaining why we are taking a different stance on one versus the other.
Well, let me see if I could alleviate perhaps some of the guilt you feel, where for me, it's a kind of a matter of like choosing your battles, right? Sun Tzu probably said something like, don't start a war you can't win. You know what I mean? It's like, why?
I love this premise of like, So-and-so historical figure probably said something like this.
I haven't read The Art of War. What am I like, that kind of person? I'm really not. I'm
Googling it. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Keep going.
I'm sure someone somewhere said, like, don't start a war you can't win. That just seems like good advice in general.
He did say that.
Okay, yes.
If a battle cannot be won, do not fight it.
There you go. Okay. There's a world in which we can defeat Disney, right? But we're just so far removed from that place, right? We can't even get like a US general strike to happen, okay? We're just collectively, like as a society, we're just like very far off from this world where we can have that much pressure or power over these types of things. I think our energy could almost be better spent somewhere else. And the fact is, like, we don't really talk about a ton of games that have Disney-related IPs. This isn't our domain, where we can have a call to action that's going to have a material effect with significant outcomes, right? Mm-hmm. The most that we could say, and we just said it earlier, which is like, cancel your Disney Plus subscription if you feel that that's warranted. And honestly, like, I will support canceling a subscription to just about fucking anything. You just cancel the subscriptions. I guarantee you there's some physical media method out there that you can follow. Right? Just go rip DVDs again, okay? That's my main advice. That's the real ethical way to do it.
Yeah.
So another thing that we can kind of touch on and bring it back to board game in a bit here, because we're just talking about ethical consumption broadly. There is a method through which you can commit board game piracy. And to a certain degree, we've even talked about it before. Like, we've all low-key sort of advocated for it. Piracy is maybe like something to sort of discuss when we talk about ethical consumption, right? And it's a hot topic button issue right now, right? Is piracy ethical in your view as a deontologist?
Well, no. That's the definition. Yeah, I mean, I know you and I disagree on this.
Virtue ethics speaking to piracy being like a moral wrong?
No.
Because deontology would be like, are you the type of person who would commit piracy?
Virtue is like you are in the middle. There is a concept of being virtuous, and that is when you are neither too much or too little of something. And so if you're being virtuous, it means you're not being generous to the point where you are giving people the benefit of the doubt for everything, but you're also not to the point where you're like stealing, being reluctant to provide anything. I think that's probably where the virtue part comes in. I'm less familiar with that rhetoric. I think the Kantian approach would be something more along the lines of like, and folks, if you know more about this, please chime in. This is very backseat philosophy over here, but like, it's one thing to be motivated for your personal interest to steal something. And there may be discussions about whether or not that motivation is justified given your interests, right? But from a question of morality, whether it's right or wrong, Immanuel Kant would say that it is wrong to steal because the categorical imperative states that if it is something that generally would be cause for harm without an explicit target, then it is harmful.
Right. And so you generally subscribe to that.
Right. If you eat food, it's not creating bad for other people. It is not an action that harms others. But if you steal, it is an action that harms others. There's somebody that's affected in a negative way. Maybe there is a motivation behind that is justified, but the act itself of stealing is in and of itself morally wrong, according to this philosophy.
Right. So it's like prisoner 24601 should not have stolen the loaf of bread to feed his starving family, according to Kant, in a sense, because
it's more nuanced than that. It's like the act was wrong. The act was wrong, but they may have had a strong enough drive and strong enough motivation to do it.
A justification, perhaps.
Yeah, but that doesn't absolve them of the action being wrong.
I see what you're saying, I think. That leads me to ask you the question, though, about this idea, right? You see this popping up a lot, which is if payment isn't ownership, then piracy isn't theft, I think is the line. Have you heard this?
No, I haven't.
it's like so it goes beyond just like having a subscription account. Like, let's say I make a purchase to own the rights, right, to digital content. So I paid to have the Naked Gun on my YouTube account, allegedly permanently, right? So I just paid full price, $15 or whatever. Now I can like stream the Naked Gun whenever I want. If I do that and then YouTube later goes like, okay, well, for whatever contract reasons, we're deleting the Naked Gun from our platform, which in the current legal status, they can't do.
I haven't heard that wording of it, but I have heard this in the music community because I collect vinyl, and this is a pretty big argument for why physical media for music is important.
Yeah.
So
it's because
I see what you're saying.
That lack of ability to actually maintain the integrity of having it.
If we bring that back to board games for a second, right?
Okay.
Piracy would be okay if our main consumption method is Board Game Arena or Tabletop Simulator. But with that line of logic, you probably shouldn't be pirating board games if our primary means of consumption is to actually physically own them. Or at least that's not the justification you can use for the piracy. Maybe you have another one.
You wouldn't download a board game.
Yeah, you wouldn't download a board game.
But you can't, right? There's print and play, I think, is where I was thinking of it. And yes, technically the component quality is ass, blah, blah, blah. But it's like you could technically get away with owning a lot more games than you actually have purchased in that sense, right? But then it's like almost like thought crime, because it's just like, so what? You learn the rules to a different game that uses the same set of cards. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Like we talked about the objective moral right or wrong, like that angle. But we can talk about the utilitarian one too if you want, because I think that's more where you're going with this. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. Like you're taking more of a utilitarian approach to this.
I think I have a utilitarian mindset, materialist mindset in general with a lot of this, yeah.
So I would argue that while that argument is justified for piracy of some content and some media, that argument falls flat when it comes to board games.
Define falls flat.
The net positive that you get from providing access to those board games without supporting the original creators, whether those be the publishers or the designer, are not justified. I do not treat pirating a board game the same as I do pirating a movie. It's just a way smaller community that is more significantly impacted by such an act. Do you not agree?
No, I mean, like, I think I do, especially, again, if you're just looking at it from a material standpoint. It's like, obviously, like, ripping off a game, creating, like, some sort of knockoff at home. I don't think it's wrong, though, to do something like that.
It depends.
I mean, it's so effortful that it seems like self-defeating, frankly.
For me, the wrongness of it depends on how they're going about it, right? If they don't have the expendable income but wish to interface with this hobby, it's a very different story from if they're just trying to avoid, either supporting the creator or spending too much money on this hobby. Those are two very different situations. Similarly, if they print the game, regardless of if it was endorsed, in which case it's just an available print and play, or it was pirated, and then purchase it, that's a very different narrative than if they are doing this and that's their final copy and that's it. And then like there's other factors, like if the game is out of print and they create a print and play, we talked about this in the print and play episode, it's a completely different narrative than if the game just came out and they're just refusing to buy a copy.
This is giving me some interesting thoughts. So, I understand, we don't want to be here all night, but let me throw a couple of like scenarios at you, right? Because that's what ethics is really all about. Let's say that like I'm too broke to truly be able to feed my family. I'm going into Target and I'm getting the 5-finger discount on a bit of food, right?
Right.
What we were just talking about earlier with the Les Miserables reference was like, this is not something that we are saying you can't or shouldn't do. It's more just like Kant would say you're guilty, but you were right to do it. That's kind of what you're getting at earlier.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Okay, I'm the same character, right? I don't have enough money to go around. I need to steal to truly survive. Now, in addition to stealing some bread and tuna or something to make a sandwich, I also grab a copy of Uno or something.
Yeah.
Something that fits in my pocket, right?
The trifecta: bread, tuna, and Uno.
A couple of pieces of bread, some tuna fish, and a can. Somehow.
You got yourself a nice
and
night.
A copy of Uno. Now we're having a party, okay? Is that worse? Like,
Yes. It's worse.
Okay.
You don't need the Uno.
You don't need the Uno, but see...
Also, the Uno is kind of a bad argument. It's a bad faith argument because Uno is such a commercial... It's like such a commercially available game.
Well, that's the thing about it, right? It's like, because you were saying like...
But that matters.
piracy...
Context matters. You said it yourself.
Well,
if they were nabbing a copy of Yokai Septet, that's a very different story than if they're nabbing a copy of Uno.
This is true. So let's make it be Uno, I guess, for this sake. Because you were talking earlier about how like pirating, like a movie by a big major studio, blah, blah, blah. It's like not going to have the same material impact as...
And I think that still stands. If you're putting in Uno, you're making it closer to the movie and thereby destroying my argument by changing it. I don't feel the same way about mass market games.
If I'm too broke to provide for my family, I steal a copy of Uno. That's pretty much all right.
It's more all right. I would even argue you don't need the copy of Uno, but like...
Well, but I want to have fun with my family. I got a family to feed.
It's a sliding scale, right?
Uno.
Yeah, it's a sliding scale. Like, I think you need the food more than the Uno, but I think it'd be okay to take the Uno too.
Right. I'm the type of guy who says like 100% like you deserve the Uno. You deserve a PlayStation 5 if you can get away with it. Because like that's kind of... It goes back to like the ethics of capitalism in general. It's just kind of like the only reason a person in this society is deprived in the first place is because there is an arbitrary lack of access that is unjust in every case, right? And so to me, it's like, yes, if everyone just went out and started stealing.
Okay, but you've given two examples of things from big corporations. This is where I think your argument falls a little short. Like, again, if it's Yokai Septet, do you feel the same way?
Yes, but I allow for the fact that is going to have a more deleterious effect on the other end.
So why is the answer still yes? Is what I want to understand. I would like to get into your head on this.
Because to me, the conditions that separate a person like me or you who can afford a copy of Yokai Septet and the conditions that this hypothetical person who is very real in a lot of ways, the conditions between myself and that person are arbitrary. There is no moral justification for why they can't have the experience of Yokai Septet. Now, obviously,
there is a justification because it'll cause problems for the person who created Yokai Septet. It does have ramifications. You're saying it like it doesn't, but it does.
I think if there was collective action to steal copies of Yokai Septet, then there would be like some true harm arising. But I just feel like the harms are so small.
Your thing is hedging on it being small.
It's so relative as well, right?
I disagree.
Well, but it's
like
also
fundamentally.
Relative. Like
I disagree fundamentally. There's something very different about stealing Uno to stealing Yokai Septet. There's something very different about stealing PS5 to stealing Yokai Septet. Like I can understand your argument with those examples you provided, but it really falls flat when we're talking specifically about this. And that's it's going back to my point. Like, well, I'm less on board with piracy of board games because it's such a small community that really hedges on people supporting each other. And I don't think you can be dismissive of the consequences of it by just saying, oh, if only one person does it. Because if we're endorsing this kind of behavior, I think it's being a little selective by saying, oh, well, in this scenario, it's only having a small effect. But in the other scenarios, we're treating this as a holistic impact. You got to pick one or the other, Tom.
I would argue, though, that the objection you have to someone stealing Yokai Septet should equally apply to Uno if you were being like,
I disagree,
Kantian about it in a sense.
No, okay, but we're not playing in the Kantian space. We're talking about we're talking about the utilitarian. What is the impact to people? What is how much harm and how much good is happening? Well, in that instance, there is a difference between these two scenarios. That's what I'm saying. Even if we use your argument, there's a problem with what you're saying is what I'm trying to poke at. And you're like, no, I disagree.
Well, let me just play my Uno reverse card here, which is like the only reason it's like a problem that one's a problem and the other's not for you is because there's a relativity to the level of harm.
Yes,
the amount of
there
harm
is a
for the
relativity.
Yokai Septet. But you're kind of, but I'm telling you that like it's more, I guess like the rule that I'm following is more absolute in this sense. But you're saying that there's no value.
Absolute is contradictory to utilitarianism.
But you got me there. But I guess like I guess what I'm saying is just like to steal a copy of Uno, that I can recognize that there's a difference in the amount of impact, but the rationale that justifies it is the same.
I'm not arguing with the rationale, but I'm arguing with the impact. That's literally what I'm saying, Tom.
Okay, well then we agree, I guess. Like the impact is different and therefore it's worse, but I guess
I'm not arguing with the rationale. I understand that part of what you're saying. I'm arguing with the idea that you think it's still justified despite the difference in impact. That is the problem I have.
Well, okay, let's carry it a bit further, right? Because like, let's imagine that like everyone just starts stealing copies of Uno. You know, it's like what threshold would it take before it would become a problem? I understand that like it would become a problem sooner for Yokai Septet because they don't have as much margin to lose because it's not a game that's being published by Hasbro.
Point. That is the whole point of what I'm saying, Tom, that it would happen sooner. Yes, I agree with you. I don't understand why the hypothetical of Uno changes that.
Why is it a good thing that Hasbro gets destroyed?
I'm not saying it's a good thing. Uno? I even said I disagreed with that. I'm just saying I understand the Uno more than the Yokai Septet. I'm playing with you in your space to try and understand why you are making the difference. So to tell me why, well, I'll flip it on you. Like, why do you think it's still okay to take the Yokai Septet? Given your stance on things, why do you think it's okay?
Why do I think it's okay? I think it's okay because I could buy a copy of Yokai Septet. And it's like, what separates me from someone without the money to do that? And I don't think there is anything moral between me and that other person. Like there's no moral separation. But there is
something between you and the designer.
I understand that, which is why, because I have the means, I should buy it, in a sense, right? Okay. The person without the means, I don't think that they are obligated to find the means first. You know what I'm saying?
Like, I don't know if you're just refusing to understand this at this point, or if you're like...
I think I'm just struggling.
Or if you're having a hard time. Let us pretend that Yokai Septet just came out, and there are only two other people left in the world. It is the designer, it is you, and it is a poor person that cannot afford Yokai Septet. If we use your example, I agree that it's not right for that person to be deprived of being able to play that game. In this act, them stealing the game harms the designer proportionally, maybe even more, maybe even less. Let's just say less, right? Just to really lean into your argument, right? Let's say that them stealing the game, they get a +1.
Okay.
But then the designer gets a -0.8.
I see what you're saying.
A utilitarian would argue that the best thing to do is to steal it. Yeah. I'm still with you right now.
Positive EV.
What I am arguing is that we do not have a way of knowing that. You are operating on this scenario as if this is the truth, and that's a dangerous place to operate in, because if we go back to this example, there is a very, very good chance, I would even argue a more likely chance, that in this hypothetical scenario, the person stealing, maybe they don't even give a shit about Yokai Septet. For them, it's a 0.5 that they stole it. And now the designer is down 0.8. There has been more harm that has been introduced into the system by the act of stealing. This is where I have a problem with what you're saying, because you're operating on this assumption that the person stealing is always going to get more out of it than the person being stolen from. And while I see that argument for a PS5, I don't see that argument for the board game space. I think it is really harmful to create a culture where it's okay to just pirate board games. It's a very different argument than pirating other forms of media that are much more mass produced. I would even argue that like pirating like music from small artists is a very different story. Like pirating indie films is a very different story than pirating like things from really large businesses. That stuff like that, those contexts matter.
I found it interesting that with what you were saying, there was like this 0.8 loss and there was this like 1 point gain for the guy who stole the yokai. And then yours, in order to sort of explain your, I suppose, worldview in this case, you just kind of had to change the numbers. You basically said, like, I think the reality is 0.5, it's like a 0.5 gain and a 0.8 loss, which it's like, yeah, in that scenario, like, there is like there's a net negative in the system. Like
I think the difference between my argument and yours is that I'm saying we don't know. It could be one or the other. And you're operating under the assumption that the first one is the truth.
No, I think that's where we're misunderstanding each other potentially. Like, I actually don't think it matters whether or not the guy stealing Yokai Septet is like benefiting from it more than the designer.
Why doesn't it matter?
Because there's no distinction between the person who has the means and the person who does not. Do you see what I'm saying there?
One is causing harm to the designer and one is not. There is a distinction. There is a distinction, like, Tom. You say there's no distinction. There is one.
The only reason that one person has money and the other doesn't is through
No, I understand that
the system
part,
that they live in.
But
yeah.
I'm not disagreeing with you on whether or not the two people equally deserve Yokai Septet.
Okay.
I am disagreeing with you on whether or not the act that they are taking.
That person should still not take it. It's like, it doesn't matter that they are entitled to it in my worldview. They still should not take it because it would do harm. There's a difference between entitlement and the consequence of actions. I mean, honestly, I think I'm like kind of on board with that, where it's like you have a right to play Yokai Septet.
But it doesn't mean you can steal it.
Well, it's like you can steal it, but you may introduce suffering as a result, suffering you can't comprehend.
Yes. Yeah. I'm willing to agree with that. Yeah.
But it's like, again, like the only reason that the Septet designer is suffering is because they live in a capitalist society where they need to have money in order to afford the necessities of life, right?
Right. But then we're going back to the no ethical consumption under capitalism thing, which we both agree with, right? Yeah. Like,
it's just kind of like the world's a fuck. Like, it doesn't matter because like none of us are getting enough bread to actually eat some bread. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
No, I think maybe like if I were to summarize where we disagreed and maybe we finally come to a quorum here, like I 100% agree with you that the person that can't afford Yokai Septet should be able to afford Yokai Septet. The only difference is that like it's the harm caused in their action. They may be causing unforeseeable harm in one scenario where like I find it much more likely versus the PS5 scenario. And that context matters.
All right, I'm with you. And this is why I got it all tied up here. This is why you should support your local library and get your local library to invest in board games, because then everyone in your community can play a copy of Yokai Septet and you can divide ownership through taxes or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is good. That's how you can consume ethically the library. The only ethical consumption under capitalism. And I'm not kidding.
You're making a fair argument. I'm not going to disagree with you on that. The library is great. In conclusion, Pirate Uno, purchase Yokai Septet. And if you can't afford it, don't steal it.
If you can't afford it, convince your local library to buy it.
Exactly.
If they won't buy it, then steal it maybe. But
get your rich friend to buy Yokai Septet and play it with them.
There you go, yeah. Yeah.
Because you don't want to harm the designer.
Friends with a rich person. You don't want to, but sometimes you have to.
No,
That's all
no,
I'm saying.
Tom. No. I thought we got somewhere. Why are you coming back?
Obviously, what we've demonstrated here is that you, in good faith, any two people can have a reasonable discussion that might ultimately go a little bit in circles, and they'll probably have to revisit it outside of recording hours.
There'll probably be a lot of editing too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's for sure. But
I think another key draw that we more on like what we talked about earlier, but like it's important for you as an individual to make those distinctions of what lines you draw and to operate under that. I think it is too exhausting for any individual to operate in a world where you can objectively boycott everything. I don't even think it's possible to make that distinction. I don't think it's possible to create that code. So it becomes on you to determine what are the things that you prioritize the most and whether or not those things outweigh the benefits you get from consuming said board game. I think you make your lines and from there use those lines to determine whether or not you should purchase something or support it.
Well, here's my call out post to people listening to this episode. Stop buying fucking Chick-fil-A, okay? It's not that good in the first place. Stop fucking buying it. It's not that hard. It really, really isn't. Okay? You want to talk about ethical consumption? Stop going to goddamn fucking Chick-fil-A, okay?
It's good. We were playing in the board game space for a good amount of time there, and you were like, that's too much board games. Let's go back to this. All right, you want to lead us out?
Yeah, I think that's going to do it for this week. That'll do it for this episode, this podcast, if you can even call it that. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, especially our patrons. Thank you to Michael, Tyler, Devon, and Josh of the Boise RainBeaus for your sweet segue music. And thank you to Bonehouse for letting us use your song Rot as our opening theme.
If you're loving the cast, share with a friend or on Reddit or BGG. You can also reach out directly at shelfstablecast@gmail.com. All this and more available in the show notes. Tom, I added a few new cool topics. You want to check them out?
Next week, Kenny, I think we're going to take it in a very interesting direction. We're going to talk about games that we like that do things we don't like.
Yeah. And later we'll do things we don't like in games that we do like.
Oh, there you go. No, wait, that's what this is.
No, I know. I'm doing a bit.
Okay. Well, that'll be next week. Games we like that do things that we don't like, as opposed to, right? That's what we're going to do. I'm not going to make it confusing. It's already confusing enough. We'll see you then. We'll figure it out next week.
See ya.
See ya.